speak to you on these issues. We now move on, and the US Federal Aviation Administration has issued a 60-day warning for airlines flying over parts of Mexico, Central America and South America due to potential military activities and GPS interference. The advisory covers airspace over Mexico, Ecuador, Colombia and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. This comes after US military actions in Venezuela and heightened tensions with regional leaders. Mexico clarified that the advisory only affects US operators and does not restrict its airspace. The FAA's warning follows previous disruptions in the Caribbean, including a JetBlue flight incident near Venezuela in December. We stay in the Americas for our next story, and Brazil's military leadership is urging rapid enhancement of its air defense systems and the creation of a domestic UAV fleet in response to rising regional tensions after a US military attack on Venezuela. President Lula da Silva met with armed forces commanders who highlighted strategic vulnerabilities and recommended upgrades to medium and long-range air defenses, modernization of helicopter units, and the acquisition of reconnaissance and attack drones. Brazil's Defense Minister José Múcio Monteiro noted that around 10,000 troops are deployed along the Amazon region border with Venezuela, but said their equipment must be reviewed to counter emerging threats. The meeting follows a US operation on January the 3rd that struck civilian and military targets in Venezuela and resulted in the capture and removal of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, actions condemned by Caracas as military aggression. Joining us now to discuss this situation is Major General Sudhakar G, a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. Now, of course, things seem to have calmed down relatively, but of course, those tensions are still there. We are, after all, only about 2 weeks following this operation. But this build-up that we're seeing in the Caribbean still remains. And now we are seeing Latin American countries remain being concerned about their security in the Western Hemisphere. Do you see this escalating, Major General G?
Good morning, Thomas. Thank you for inviting me for your show. It's always a pleasure and delight to be in your show, particularly when you are anchoring and moderating the discussion. Very futuristic question. You see, there is nothing constant in international relationship. All I would say in response to your question is that while the threat may not be imminent, but it may crop up anytime soon. In 21st century, with leadership like Donald Trump, he says something, does something. Like classic example is the previous attack which took place in the month of June in Iran. He said he will come back in 2 weeks' time, but before people could have a breather, they could realize the USA had hit the nuclear installations in Iran. So this is the level of unpredictability. So therefore, what I would say that the attack on Brazil, they may call it under law enforcement measure, but it has been a military attack. They have made a kinetic attack against Venezuela. Brazil and Venezuela, they have a common border. And what happened on 3rd of January 2026 could also very well happen against Brazil. They have a common border. The CIA modules are operating. America has made its intention very clear that they are going in for the oil fields and they will dominate everything in Venezuela. If they dominate everything in Venezuela willy-nilly, the influence is going to spread, and given the long-term perspective plan is Monroe Doctrine to be restored. If Monroe Doctrine is to be restored under the Donroe name, then they won't stop at Venezuela. So logic says that from Venezuela, it could be any other country and that any other country could be Colombia, could be Brazil. Since Brazil is having a common border, I suspect that they possibly could be targeting to influence and dominate Brazil as well in times ahead. So therefore, it is quite logical for Brazilian defense forces and the leadership to take a call in making their air defense system, going in for proactive and modern equipments like loiter ammunition, killer drones, etc., etc., and also go in for a high-end variety of air defense countermeasures so that they are not surprised the way Venezuela was surprised. The essential thing which needs to be kept in mind for Brazil is gone are the days that we used to talk about three domains: land, sea, and air. Now, the time has come, every nation has to prepare in terms of three more additional modern paradigms of the domains: cyber, space, and electromagnetic. So, therefore, Brazil would do well if they cater for these kind of eventualities and go in to prepare their air defense into making it a formidable one so that they are not surprised the way Venezuela was surprised on 3rd of January 2026. Back to you, Thomas.
Of course, this is a global trend. The United States has just announced a $1.5 trillion budget for 2027 after a $962 billion one this year. Of course, we know that NATO has increased its defense spending, apart from a couple of countries, to 5%. China's defense budget for 2025 was upped by 7%. And of course, Russia and the likes are remain in conflict, and so their defense spending had a 38% jump. Where does this play into the current global order? Of course, with countries increasing their defense spending worldwide.
Very interesting question, Thomas. In past 9 years or so, the global expenditure on defense products has gone up by more than 9%, if I respect my memory. Going by the CIPRI latest statistics, the figures are very, very alarming. They're touching almost close to 2.4 trillion US dollar. That is the kind of expenditure it has already reached. And the major countries, namely the USA, China, India, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Europe, all the countries are going in for an upward trend of military expenditure. As regards European Union, maybe if I may correct you, 5% is the target they have, Donald Trump has set for the European countries to be achieved by 2035. They are doing it in a very graduated, incremental manner. Presently, some of the countries have already hiked up their defense expenditure to 2%, close to 2%, and they will be raising it further to reach a target of 5% by 2035. This is what I have understood, but if I am wrong, I am prepared to correct myself. But be that as it may, the fundamental issue which is driving the global dynamics today is the militarization across the board without any exception. There is no country in the world where the military expenditure is not rising. Why is it going up? It is going up by virtue of couple of geopolitical factors. It is not a triggering of a war or a conflict. It is the fundamental issue is lack of trust in agreements, in common challenges, in formulating counter strategies to common challenges, not being unified, transatlantic relationship falling apart because America doesn't trust Europe, Europe doesn't trust America. So all these things today, the big question is that because of lack of trust, is or are the existing apex organizations able to deliver their mandate, common mandate or one single mandate of United Nations is to prevent occurrence of any war? Has the United Nations ever till date been successfully and effectively able to prevent any kind of conflict? That is what the moot question is. If it is not, then what is it falling or lacking in? Is it the veto power which is giving superseding the other powers in the organization, and they are ignoring the veto powers of other members of P5, and going in for arbitrary decisions? Or is it the fact of Thucydide concept that the strong will do
Okay.
what it can and the weak will continue to suffer what it must? Might is right. Is that the say in the order 21st century? If that be so, then we need to address the core issue, because militarization is taking different new forms today in 21st century. It is taking the form of the pandemic. It is taking the form of biological, chemical warfare. It is taking the form of space conflicts which are taking place. That the new layer has been added to the new dimension of the warfare. It is also taking the form of very, very innovative and creative means of deterring enemy, and by striking, going in for anti-satellite kind of measures. And the hypersonic is such a threat that no country, even the superpower itself, does not have the wherewithal to prevent or to ensure interception and detection of these missiles coming and hitting their major vital assets. So therefore, I would say that rather than militarizing the complete the world order, will do good by resorting to the traditional set of diplomacy and dialogue.
Okay.
Although I would say it has given us any
Okay.
result in the past, but we need to go back to the basics. Basics are diplomacy and dialogue, which may give us, at the end of the day, reducing the militarization, reduction of expenses on the military components and the products, thereby minimizing the potential flashpoints, and which may lead to the conflicts in the world.
Yes, Major General G, stay with us as we move on to our next story, but stay in the Latin American region, and Colombia has launched a $1.68 billion project to develop an anti-drone shield aimed at protecting the country from attacks by unmanned drones operated by illegal armed groups. The country has faced ongoing internal conflict for 6 decades, with over 450,000 lives lost. Defense Minister Pedro Sanchez described this move as one of the most innovative strategies for national security and defense. The government has allocated $271 million for the first phase of the project. Between 2024 and 2025, Colombia reported 264 attacks from explosive-laden drones, primarily in regions involved in cocoa leaf cultivation. According to reports, these attacks attributed to the National Liberation Army and FARC dissidents, resulting in 15 soldier deaths and 153 injuries. This new initiative aims to strengthen Colombia's defense capabilities. Additionally, in November, Colombia signed a $3.6 billion deal with Swedish company Saab for 17 Gripen fighter jets, further enhancing its military capacity.